the National Democratic Alliance, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, took the oath of office. It marked the beginning of a new political chapter in India. What followed over the next 12 years was not just a change in government, but an attempt to reshape the Indian state, economy, and society at staggering scale. Bharat Reloaded, a special series to mark the 12th anniversary of the NDA, will look back at these momentous years through conversations with policymakers, economists, entrepreneurs, and investors. It will take stock of a decade that sought to reimagine India. Our guest today, Shamika Ravi, will help unpack one of the singular achievements of the NDA, solving for abject poverty. At present, the poverty level in India is plumbing a historic low of less than 5%. As a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, Shamika has closely tracked and influenced this transformation. Welcome, Shamika.
Thank you, Anil. It's wonderful to be with you, yes.
Shamika, I wanted to begin with a big, very important factoid. There's been a dramatic reduction in the level of abject poverty.
That's correct.
It is right now around 5%, which is big difference from what it was there in the past, which was about 40% plus at the turn of the millennium. So how was this achieved?
Poverty is measured in very different ways, Anil. The most recent from NITI, if you remember, there was a multidimensional poverty metric, which you have seen many people cite, 25 crore people being lifted and so on. The multidimensional poverty is based on amenities, so health, education, housing. Traditionally, as economists, however, we measure poverty as a household's capacity to spend on basic things. Earlier, we used to have the Tendulkar poverty line, which had to do with destitution, which was of the nature of not being able to afford even basic caloric requirement. So it had to do with food. But over time, Rangarajan in 2014 came up with a more evolved and a sort of a moderate poverty metric, where the consumption basket includes food, but it also has health, education. In urban areas, it has rental, it has conveyance. So obviously it is much more than just food. Going by the Rangarajan poverty line, Anil, India used to have close to 30%, 29.5 to be precise, in 2011-12, when we got the last household consumption expenditure survey. The most recent one tells us that by the same metric, inflation adjusted, it is now 3.9. So obviously there has been a dramatic improvement. It translates into 302 million people being lifted out of poverty. Now, to your question of what has led to this remarkable improvement, it is not one or two things. First of all, that economic growth being redistributed through government schemes. Also, growth itself, because when you look at state level analysis, states that are growing are also able to eradicate poverty faster. So there is a direct relationship between economic growth and poverty reduction. But the government schemes, which has been in terms of food grains, for instance, availability of food grains, amenities such as water, electricity, healthcare. If you look at Ayushman Bharat, where basically the bottom 40% has inpatient costs being covered through publicly financed health insurance, education sector and so on. So there have, I think government policies are a huge contributor to it, but largely triggered again by economic growth.
So key part from what you just said is that access was enabled, not just accessing food, but access to other elements, basic foundational inclusion.
That's
as
correct.
It were, right?
That is correct. That is actually the right way to look at it, yes.
So which means it also puts the spotlight on the mechanism that enabled this. One of the standout features, say in the last decade, is the fact that social welfare has been targeted.
Yes.
So to explain it very simply, the government seems to have created an economic GPS by triangulating your Jan Dhan, Aadhaar mobile.
Absolutely.
Right? So can you dwell on this new architecture of social welfare and what is the political economy that it also conveys?
You know, one of the first reforms or the work of Modi 1 administration was basically improving and reforming the welfare architecture itself. Jan Dhan Aadhaar mobile trinity, the JAM trinity that we talk about, is like hard infrastructure, except it's, in terms of virtual having access to services and so on. But it has enabled the government to do efficient targeting, exactly what you're talking about. But along with that, Anil, what has also happened is that the policy of saturation, which means basic amenities, will be made available to all Indians everywhere. And of course, that amenity basket itself is expanding as we get richer, so the state has more resource. But it started out with electricity, bank account, right? Then it went to toilets, but then subsequently housing. Access to amenities, now drinking water, if we consider pipe drinking water. That basket has been expanding. Now, you should really view what is happening in India in the last 12 years as something that happened in the US economy post the world wars, where basic infrastructure was made universal. And what it does do is that it sets a very long-term productivity enhancement of individuals. That when I am better fed, when I have access to health, when I have electricity, I have clean water and so on, I'm likely to be more productive as well. So we have really laid the foundation for, I think, next 100 years of economic growth. That's the way we envision. So it's not just a redistribution scheme is what I'm trying to explain. It fundamentally feeds back into the economic growth as well.
So in fact, drinking water is a great example. Most people are not aware that in Uttar Pradesh, which is India's most populated state, prior to 2019, access in rural areas to water by tap was less than 2% in 2019, which is shocking 6 decades after.
That's true.
Shamika, I wanted to...
the state which has seen the fastest improvement in pipe drinking water?
I believe Bihar.
Bihar. You are obviously much better informed, but if you ask a layman, then many of us, we don't really know about these kind of tectonic shifts that are happening in some of the unlikeliest of places. So no, I think state after state, we are making huge progress.
I wanted a follow-up question that access has been established, but does access automatically lead to empowerment, economic empowerment?
Economic empowerment, Anil, comes, access is a necessary condition. However, beyond that, there are several other steps which remain right now a work in progress. That has to do with quality of education. It has to do with gender inequality and how we tackle that in society. So there are other long-term structural issues, healthcare, which goes beyond financing, right? Ayushman Bharat, I think we have taken care of health and morbidity concerns of households when there is hospitalization. But we also know that healthcare concerns go beyond that. And so empowerment comes from a combination of many of these things. But as we get more affluent, the state has resources. And I think that is how we have to look at, for instance, I've heard sometimes people who are, who are very intelligent, but ask questions like, why are you giving free food grains to 80 crore people? The simple answer is because we can. It's like asking that why does a Scandinavian country give so much time off? Because they can, right? The resource that we have, now we want to use it optimally in a way that it enhances what eventually comes down to individual freedom, and I don't have to worry about hunger deaths anymore, which is a very big shift from how India has traditionally seen poverty. If you remember 50 years back, right, in the 70s, begging for food grains, being denied. Food security was a huge concern. In fact, the driving force behind the Green Revolution. I feel very reassured in saying that we have achieved those goals. Food security is no longer a grave concern for us. Nutritional security is what we are now looking at. So I think empowerment is a moving target. But eventually we want every Indian to have that degree of free will, because your basic necessities are taken care of.
You're so right. Most of us are just one disease away from poverty, particularly the fact that non-communicable diseases are the most dominant
That's correct.
killer in India right
That's
now.
correct, yes.
So it's Ayushman Bharat is actually a lifesaver for millions in this country.
We are a very large country though. So sometimes, NCDs and in particular cardiovascular ailments are the biggest causes of death in, let's say, Kerala. So the district hospital, the way they need to be designed to cater to the local needs are very different from one of the biggest causes of disease in a state like UP, where diarrheal deaths are one of the leading. Now there, the district hospitals need to be designed very differently. So, we are a very large country, and which is why a lot of our conversations, even within Delhi in the last 10 years, have now shifted to what we call precision policy making. That there are very few now national level narratives or policy making that happens. We went to aspirational districts because we identified those pockets of concern. But now we have gone to aspirational blocks because now it has to be focused even further. Most states in India have achieved the major sustainable development goals. It's not an all India problem. But there are 7 or 8 states where key SDGs are still a concern. And that is where a lot of the focus now needs to be. And even within those states, it's not all districts, mostly tribal districts, remote districts, and so on. Within a district, it's almost focused on certain blocks. So again, precision policy making, it's too large a country.
True. Shamika, this while economic empowerment is indeed a moving target, how would you rank the performance, say, in the last 12 years in a scale of 1 to 10? The kind of milestones that have been achieved?
Objectively, Anil, if we look at it in terms of moving or meeting the sustainable development goals, then we have made unprecedented gains. Poverty being SDG 1. If you look at sustainable development goal which cater to maternal health, then India is eradicating maternal mortality at 2.5 times the speed as the global average. Right? If you look at infant mortality, we are able to reduce it significantly faster than elsewhere. In fact, post-pandemic, when you look at what happened to levels of poverty, many countries actually did slide back. Far richer countries than us, like South Africa, Brazil, they saw an increase in poverty. We did not see an increase in poverty. So there is an element of reduced vulnerability as well, not just abject poverty, but the shock that you mentioned, that you're one shock away. We're trying to make citizens immune to shocks as much as we can. That's how vulnerability can be reduced. So I think objectively, when you look at it from these metrics, we have come a long way. There has been unprecedented gains in the last 10 years. It has also translated in people's aspirations simultaneously. People want more of everything. People are also, we are a democracy at the end of the day, one that is loud, one that is interconnected, one that has access to free information, free press globally. People also aspire, people in rural areas aspire for life matching those of metros, being able to afford lifestyle and consume the way the richer households are doing. So I think, again, those are also source of hard work and growth and so on. But some of it also translates into occasional frustration. And I think one sector where we see that a little closely is the education sector. And by that I mean, our young people, it's a global phenomenon called youth inactivity, but our young people today who are the most educated, so graduates and above, they are 4 times more likely to be unemployed or sitting at home than our least educated young people. So all our young people, meaning under 30 who have been to school and not anymore, more education, they are all working. Everybody is gainfully employed in something. But the most educated are waiting for the right job. So aspirationally, they can afford to wait longer. So in that sense, the target keeps moving because now one doesn't have to worry about hunger deaths that, the minute I come out of college, I need to get a job because how else will I survive or take care of my family. I think those basic needs have been met, so young people are now waiting for the right job. And that's just in health. But there are, aspirational stories which are emerging from across the sector. In many ways, it is a good thing, because unless you aspire, how do you work hard towards achieving that? So I look at it as a positive.
Shamika, I also wanted to draw one of your very deep areas of research on gender. So a key part of this inclusion journey is also the empowerment of women. These 50 crore banks, people who are banked in the last decade, I think about 70-80% are women. So they never owned a bank account.
That's true.
So how does that play into this whole, inclusion and capability building?
I'm so glad you asked that, because what you're getting now into is one of the well-established pathways of reduction in poverty or improvement in lifestyle in general. Many things have happened in the last 12 years, but here is a remarkable statistics that while all India poverty has fallen from 29.5 to 3.9, women's poverty, adult women above 18, has fallen from 34% to 2.1%. So there has been a disproportionately greater gain for women in India in the last 12 years than has been on an average. That translates, and by the way, when we say poverty means the women are spending. This is not a wealth and asset alone. This is women actually spending more. What we are basically saying is that all of these big schemes that have targeted women have led to bargaining power within the household. So think about a state like Rajasthan, that even when all India poverty was 29.5, adult male poverty was only 15%. Because it tells you that the nature of our society and the way communities are structured, that older men, their needs are met first when it comes to consumption, and then it is the children and the women. But now it seems to have flipped. Within the household, there are changes happening. It's the women who have much lower poverty, which means their spending has improved significantly more. Those kind of dramatic shifts have basically reinforced what we have known in development economics from global experiences, that whenever women are empowered, are given means in terms of entitlements or economically empowered through financial instruments, etc., it has an impact on the family and the community. While when we empower men, the impact is there on the men, it is there overall on the family, but it doesn't automatically translate into better health, better education, better outcomes such as height and weight of children, etc. So this targeting of women in India is a very conscious policy decision, because we did come from a place of disadvantage. There remain certain kinds of discrimination in society even today. For instance, if we look at nature of hospitalization, you look at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, their data. Barring gynecology and obstetrics, which is a women's department, if you look at the other specializations, trauma, orthopedics, if you look at cardio, etc., very few women are brought to the hospital. It's not true that they don't have ailments, they do have ailments. But you see, health seeking requires somebody in the household to make that decision and take the sick woman to the hospital. That is not happening as much as it should. In fact, it's 50% less than men. So what I'm saying is we have come from very far, because we started out with a base which was extremely discriminatory. But we still have, when it comes to gender, while we have made tremendous gains which has translated into improvement for everyone, we still have pockets and areas where we need to continue the effort.
Shamika, in that case, this reservation, mandatory reservation, which is going to kick in 2029 before the elections expected, should tilt the scales dramatically, right? I mean, if there is political power to back this economic empowerment.
So Anil, I think what we are witnessing right now in India is a virtuous cycle in democracy. Women surge in women voters, massive surge. not just at the parliamentary constituency levels, year on year on year, or election on election, but also assembly elections. Increasingly, if you look at urban local bodies, panchayats, etc., women voters have surged. And they are actually making an impact in terms of how elected representatives are responding to that surge. Think of it, when Deve Gowda had tabled the women's reservation bill, nothing happened out of it. Subsequently, it was tabled at least a dozen times. Each time, it was aborted. What happened in the last 10-15 years, that in 2023, it was near unanimously passed. Clearly, the sands have shifted. No, I mean, earth beneath our feet has moved in such major ways that even political parties which were vehemently opposed are all now supporting it. Right? That is, I think, the power, and that I would say is a self-empowerment. Women in India, women voters have tilted the scale. And I think leaders like PM Modi, with their ears on the ground and the pulse of the nation, respond to that need. That is why so many of our policies have focused on women. Because this is why I'm saying it's a virtuous cycle. The women voting for change and certain amenities and a certain nature of representation from political leadership, and the political leadership responding to that in a positive way, which reinforces it further. Now, the point of the women's reservation, will it have an impact? Yes, it will have an impact.
So, while access is a very important part of agency, the more important part is the design of that access has to be reinvented. What you just said, articulating women's point of view.
Yes.
So I'll give you a simple example, like say savings and investment options. They are all made with the male professional life
Absolutely.
span, work span.
Yes.
You join the workforce, you are continuously for 30 or 40 years and then you retire. Women, it's not so linear. It's a very non-linear process.
That's correct.
So the investment options are not meant for them.
Yes,
they are meant for men.
That's
right?
true.
So presumably all of this will also redesign.
Everything, including medical devices. Right? During the pandemic, we realized that something as innocuous as an oximeter, which all of us went and bought, it was not accurately reading, for women because it was never tested on women. So I think there are a lot of silent discrimination across sectors, which I think women's representation and articulation of that problem. Because remember, we are also in a highly digitized and increasingly AI-driven world where algorithms matter. So a lot of these discriminations, if we do not correct for them, they will continue to get reinforced in the system. So we have to correct for them. But if you look at the parliament discussions, then I was very happy to see, Anil, that women parliamentarians, in fact, do focus on set of issues which are distinct from their male counterparts. The women MPs often raise issues on health, education, livelihood,
law and order.
Law and order, while the male MPs typically tend to focus more on defense, external affairs, and so on and so forth. So there is a difference. Right? They're not all the same. And so having more women leaders, I think, is fantastic for the women, Indian democracy in general.
Finally, Shamika, this last decade, it's been a successful battle to enable access and foundational inclusion. What should the next decade focus on? Because a decade after that, India is aspiring to become a developed country.
That's true. I think there are two key things, Anil. One is urban planning. Our cities have organically developed because so far we have had the Gandhian belief that India lives in the villages. That's not true anymore. India is close to 67% urban as of the last data that I checked. So urban planning is very important. Urban governance becomes very important. And the second is skilling. I think this gap between skills that the market rewards and a degree that education eventually rewards, that is too wide and it has been too persistent for an aspiring economy. And I think the new education policy, Skill India, increasingly experimenting where companies are doing internships, apprenticeships, getting students onto the shop floor, getting companies into the classroom. I think next 10 years, 20 years, we have to just continue doing a lot more of that.
Thank you so much for speaking to us, Shamika.
My pleasure.
Over the last decade, India attempted and succeeded at something historically difficult: to solve for access and bring 50 crore people into formal systems of finance, welfare and governance. As economic agents, they are now stakeholders in the Indian economy. But today's conversation with Shamika Ravi also reminds us that inclusion is only the beginning, because access alone does not guarantee mobility. Delivery alone does not guarantee capability. And empowerment ultimately depends on whether opportunity becomes durable and self-sustaining. The next phase of India's journey will presumably focus on skilling people to fish for themselves as opposed to merely handing it to them. Thank you for watching.
जब खबर सिर्फ स्टूडियो तक सीमित न हो और सच की पड़ताल हो ग्राउंड जीरो से,
चाहे राजनीति हो
या बढ़ते भारत की कहानी, किसानों की तरक्की हो या युवाओं की आवाज,
देश के हर कोने से
सटीक और विश्वसनीय रिपोर्ट
पूरी जिम्मेदारी के साथ
जहां होती है केवल खबर।
रिपोर्ट एट 10 हर रविवार रात